He's a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He's a Fox NFL analyst. He's Stink. He's Mark Schlereth. He played in 2 Pro Bowls and won 3 Super Bowls. I want to ask you about the Cardinals and their at least some sort of pursuit in the idea of drafting Kyler Murray. Like, I get the whole idea he might be a better fit. And that, like, look, if you're going to go a completely different track than most NFL teams and get Cliff Kingsbury, who struggled to win at Texas Tech, buy into his offense and, have somebody else fix the defense. Like, I get all of that. But why are you not pumping up Josh Rosen? Why are you letting it get out that you met with Kyler Murray? Like, why are you handling it in the fashion in which they're handling it?
It's a great question. I mean, I have no idea. Obviously, they're enamored. But you mentioned it, Cliff Kingsbury. I mean, the NFL MVP was Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, you couldn't win games with Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech, right? I mean, and here's the other interesting thing. So Steve Wilks is a great guy. He was their head coach last year. He comes in and he has played a series or a system of defense, and he played it back to his Chargers days, back with Ron Rivera, to his Carolina Panthers day. He comes into Arizona, he implements that defense, and it doesn't fit the personnel he has. I mean, it's not a fit.
Right.
But he's dead set that this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to plug our players into a system. So aren't you really taking a coach and saying, all right, here's the new coach. He just wants to run his system. I get going and getting players to run that system. But the best coaches to me are coaches that say, what do I have? What's in the cupboard? And let me develop a system that fits the guys that I have. I mean, you moved up in the draft to get Josh Rosen. You moved up to get him at number 9, and now you'll be lucky to get, what, a 3rd rounder for him?
And they spent $20 million on Sam Bradford. We forget how badly they spent all that money. Sam Bradford didn't have a market, and they spent all that money on Sam Bradford. He lasted all of a couple of games, and then we remembered, oh yeah, he's Sam Bradford.
Right.
And then we also fired the offensive coordinator. Then they fired the coach, and now they're bailing on Josh Rosen 9 months in.
And by the way, Josh Rosen came into a very untenable situation where they couldn't block anybody. They didn't have a tight end that could block anybody. Their most dynamic receiver is Larry Fitzgerald, year 15. I did 5 games.
Yeah.
They were a mess.
Yes.
And you're like, all of a sudden you're like, well, that guy's a bust. Is he a bust? I don't really know, because he didn't have enough people around him to actually have any success as a rookie. So, I mean, he was put in a unbelievably difficult position, and you're already bailing on him because you're going to scrap pile it and you're going to go collegiate.
It does feel with Fitzmagic signing with Miami, it does feel like either the Giants, who now have 2 first-round picks, or the Chargers, who need an heir apparent, and, they passed on Pat Mahomes, and they're kind of probably going to forever live to regret it. Mm-hmm. That feels like the only 2 possible landing spots for Josh Rosen, who was seen to be one of the 2 or 3 best prospects in a quarterback-loaded draft last year. It's really remarkable, the fall, considering all the other things going on.
It is, but here's the thing about the NFL. Remember, Nick Foles walked away from football. He was done. He was going to go into the ministry. Andy Reid talked him out of it, brought him in for a year of football rehab.
Yeah.
And the guy just signed, an $84 million contract with Jacksonville. He comes into Philly, gets the backup role. We know what happened over the last 2 years, Super Bowl MVP. So for Josh Rosen, sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is somebody giving up on you and giving you your freedom to go find a place where you can actually learn the game and be supported by better players. This may be the best thing that's ever happened to Josh Rosen without the pressure of being, the number 9th overall. Now you're just some guy they traded a 3rd rounder for.
The Cowboys signed a name yesterday, Randall Cobb, obviously injury-plagued year last year. Is that a good addition, right? You lost your slot wide receiver, you go and sign Randall Cobb to replace him. Granted, they still have the NFL draft. You got some issues. David Irving retiring. Mm-hmm. You got another suspension in the defensive line. I'm just wondering your reaction to what the Cowboys have done so far in this offseason.
Well, I look at what the Cowboys have done, and I think by standing pat, first off, you've got a bunch of really good players that are young players that you have an opportunity to sign before they hit free agency. And I think that's the best way. Reward your players that have had success, and show that that's the organization that you want to be. We're going to reward and promote from within. We're going to let those guys develop. Randall Cobb's a good football player. Randall Cobb is a professional. Randall Cobb will be a nice addition to the Dallas Cowboys. But I always look at the first wave of free agency. I mean, to me, you're overpaying for usually damaged goods.
Right. There's a reason guys are on the market in the NFL.
Right. And so I think that first wave is like you dramatically overpaid. Like, I'll go back to last year's free agency. Remember Nate Solder, and I'm not trying to bash on Nate Solder because Nate Solder's a good football player.
Right.
But I've never looked at Nate Solder at any time during his career as a top 5 offensive tackle in the league. Never. And yet you're paying him $15 million a year. Like you had to pay him this exorbitant fee, even though he's not a top 5 player. You made him the number 1 paid guy at his position in the National Football League. That's free agency in a nutshell. So I think the real value after the first wave and the hype is done in the first week, that's where the real value in free agency lies. And so for the Dallas Cowboys, them standing pat and really doing nothing and now signing Randall Cobb to a 1-year, $5 million deal, you're getting a very professional, good football player that can come in and play multiple positions. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. He can do those things for you. You have versatility there. And come on, $5 million in the NFL now for 1 year. That's you can flip over the couch cushions in Jerry Jones' office and find $5 million. It's right there.
Okay, let me ask you about the Raiders. You and I had a great discussion. I've always been pro Raiders trade with Khalil Mack. I thought when people said, well, you can't get 2 first-round picks. He did. They didn't want to pay $90 million guaranteed. They didn't have the cash. They weren't that good defensively. I like that trade. The Sloan Sports and Analytics Conference, going back, I think, a week and a half ago, voted that the number 1 transaction, the best transaction from the Raiders' perspective in the league this year. Okay, they also traded Amari Cooper, whose contract was going to be $14 million this year, or it gets reworked.
Sure.
So now they've traded for and signed Antonio Brown to a bigger contract than that of Amari Cooper. Now they've signed Trent Brown to a huge contract, left tackle, free agent for the New England Patriots. Now that we caught our breath on the first wave of John Gruden, what do you think?
Well, I think they were in a position where if they would have paid Khalil Mack, they have cash flow issues. If they would have paid Khalil Mack, they're basically breaking the bank and saying, we're not winning with him, and if we pay him, we can't address all the other issues and needs we have on this football team. So from that aspect, they had to kind of strip this thing down to the studs and start this rebuild. And so from that aspect, I think they made a wise decision. It's always funny to me. It's like, the day after the draft is over, we get all the draft nicks and the gurus, right, that grade the draft. Like, this team got an A, this team got a B-, and I'm like, how do you know? Like, until the guy comes in and plays or doesn't play, you don't really know if they did a very good job with the draft or not. So same thing when you evaluate. Like, you can sit there and say they got great value for Khalil Mack, but until they make those picks and have those picks play, until those picks prove that they can play at the NFL level, like, I don't know the value of that trade. I've got to see who they pick, and I've got to see if those guys actually can play in the NFL. And so, I would pump my brakes on saying, man, what a great trade analytics-wise that was.
I got 30 seconds for you. Le'Veon Bell basically said that Ben Roethlisberger thinks he's Kevin Colbert. He thinks he's an owner. Should we take Le'Veon Bell at face value, considering he's now a former Pittsburgh Steeler?
Absolutely. I think there's enough smoke to where there's probably some fire there. And again, I'll go back to the organization, and I say this all the time. You're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. So if you allow him to go on the radio and bash his teammates, if you allow him to act like that, guess what? He's going to take advantage of that. And so I put that more on the organization than I do the player.
Mark Schlereth, 3-time Super Bowl champion and an NFL analyst on Fox. Great stuff, as always.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.